eliminate property taxes in 2026, but here's not what they're telling you. There's multiple bills of what they're trying to propose, and this is what a lot of people are not aware of. And so I am here to let you know what's going on in the Florida housing market right now. And so I want to go over some of these House joint resolutions right now that are going on in the background. I'm going to read a little bit of the article, but I'm not going to go too much into that because it is an opinion piece, and I want it to be neutral as far as what the actual what the actual like laws are trying to put into what policies are trying to put into law. Excuse me. And so I want to more focus on that because a lot of people don't know that there's multiple of them, and also that they're really worried about how we're going to fund public schools, and there's a lot of just noise around what's going on with that, and they're not talking about it. So I'm here to let you know what's going on, educate you, so that we have a better idea what's going on. So let's get into the piece. The cost of property tax reforms, overview background. As the Florida League of Cities explained, property tax reform has emerged one of the most consequential fiscal policy debates in decades. State leaders are debating whether structural reform, including possible constitutional changes, is warranted. Throughout 2025, Governor Ron DeSantis called for the elimination of property taxes, while the Florida legislature passed a provision in its tax package to analyze the impact of eliminating property taxes. DOGE. The Florida House of Representatives convened a select committee on property taxes to consider the issue, as its efforts have produced several joint resolutions to eliminate or reform the property tax code, which lawmakers are considering during the 2026 legislative session. To date, in the Florida Senate, lawmakers have only filed a handful of resolutions, and the executive office of the governor is yet to offer any guidance on what property tax reform ought to be. Instead, the governor vetoed the legislature's property tax study and released a budget recommendation for the fiscal year of 2026 through 2027. Without any plans beyond setting $300 million aside to support ongoing policies consideration, and during that any statewide property tax relief framework is implemented in a stable and fiscally sound manner. Legal considerations: Florida voters will ultimately decide the fate of property tax reform. Joint resolutions are the only authorized method by which the legislature may propose amendments to the state constitution. To pass, both chambers must approve the resolution by a 3/5 vote. Thereafter, the resolution would appear as a proposed amendment on a statewide ballot, where it would need 60% approval to become law. We're a supermajority state here in Florida. Any joint resolution passed by the legislature would appear on November 2026 ballot. So, the current landscape of proposals: law enforcement, firefighters, and first responders. As originally filed, all of the House Joint Resolutions (SJRs) below would prohibit localities from reducing funding for law enforcement and mandating a baseline budget equal to the fiscal year of 2025 to 2026 or fiscal year 2026 into 2027. Policies are also amending the mandate to include firefighters and other first responders. So as you can see, not all property taxes are going to be eliminated. They're still going to be there for public services. It's just going to be a lot of the bulk things outside of that, public services and also schools. And you'll see that here later on that they're going to be eliminating. So House Joint Resolution 201, elimination of non-school property tax for homesteads. So that's the big focus there, right? Is the homesteader property. This is going to include only primary residences, not going to include investment properties. It's not going to include commercial properties. It's not going to include second homes. It's not going to include homes that people who are living out of state and have another home here. Especially if the residency is still in the other state, they're not going to be able to claim this tax. This tax for the home, these tax advantages, because they're not homesteaded here. So that's one main thing to keep in mind. So HJR 201 would exempt the state's 5.1 million homesteaded properties, i.e. primary residences, from all property taxes other than school district collections. Florida's Revenue Estimate Conference estimates HJR would cost local governments, excluding school districts, $18.3 billion annually. So, as you can see, schools will still be funded. Moving on to 203. Phased out elimination of non-school property of homesteads. Florida offers a benefit known as a homestead exemption to residents who make their home their permanent primary residence. There are two main homestead exemptions available to homeowners. One, a $25,000 exemption for all property taxes that apply to the $0 to $25,000 range of assessed value, and two, a second $25,000 exemption indexed to inflation for all non-school property taxes that applies to the $50,000 to $75,000 range of assessed value. HJR 203 would add $100,000 to the state's second homestead exemption each year for 10 years to phase out property taxes. Then, beginning in 2037, homesteads would be exempt from all non-school property taxes. The REC estimates that the HJR 203 would cost local governments, excluding school districts, $13.3 billion annually. HJR 209, Property Insurance Relief, Homestead Exemption, Non-School Property Tax. HJR 209 would create an alternative $200,000 second homestead exemption for homeowners who have comprehensive homeowners insurance. Approximately 83% of homeowners would qualify. The REC estimates that this alternative homestead exemption would cost local governments, excluding home districts, $8.6 billion annually. And that's a big concern actually for a lot of people here who live in Florida. You know that our insurance costs have risen a lot, especially with Citizens insurance. You know, a lot of people have been dropped off from Citizens, and you know, a lot of people just voluntarily choose to not use Citizens insurance because it has been very costly for them. And so, you know, there's the good thing though on the bright side is a lot of insurance policies have been coming down to Florida. You know, we were having an issue with that in the beginning with Ian. That was a big issue, but as time has gone by, more insurance companies are moving back into the state, and it's going to be a lot more like your small time insurance companies, and not so much, you know, your corporate well known insurance companies. So that's some things to consider. And you know, luckily this year in 2025 we didn't have a hurricane, which you know has been amazing because it's going to be able to give some relief, you know, for on both sides of it. And you know, we even had refund checks from some insurance companies for auto insurance because auto insurance has gone up drastically too. And you know, it's not just home insurance that's gone, and auto insurance has gone up. A lot of people don't understand, and I didn't know this either until I started speaking with a home insurance specialist whose family's been doing it for decades and through different generations. And you know, I didn't consider this, but population density is a huge factor that plays into home insurance. So not just a hurricane impact that, you know, and the tornadoes and the flooding, you know, and all that stuff, like not just weather, but the amount of population moving into the state, that also affects, you know, how much insurance is costing. Because if you know what it is to drive here in Florida, you know that it is a storm. Like it is the most wildest, violent place to like drive sometimes. We've driven across the country, and I can safely say, between like Atlanta and Chicago, I haven't gone out to New York, but those are probably the two craziest places that I've driven. Vegas too. Phoenix wasn't too bad. I'm just thinking like major cities. San Antonio, Austin, Houston, not terrible. But you know, here in Florida, we're a huge melting pot. Like we have people from all over the world, and so you know, they've even gone to the extent of just like making driver's license to get a driver's license. You have to know English in order to get a driver's license here in Florida. Now they're changing that up, and so you know, everyone here is just like everywhere and from everywhere. Like every place, everywhere, they're here. We're the melting pot of the world, you know, and so you know, it is a different type of driving that you need to know here. Luckily, you know, I grew up traveling back and forth from Grand Rapids to Chicago growing up, and so you know I'm pretty good with it. I can dip the whip, I can move it around, like it's not a problem for me. But people who are not used to like driving like that, especially if you go to Miami, like get ready. You're in like take your anti anxiety meds, take take what you need to take because it is a monster driving in Miami. I get a little intimidated going to Miami. Tampa's not too bad. That I can handle. Tampa's not bad. Orlando's not terrible either. The traffic's just like horrendous. Don't get me wrong. Like the traffic is terrible. I-4 is a monster. I-275, I-75, 301. Like it is just so much traffic when people are getting out of work or going to work, and especially now that the snowbirds are here, like it's just so much more traffic. But it is a new. It's just a whole different thing. It's an experience driving on these roads. But anyway, so that's just another thing to consider too, as property, not just property taxes, but just insurance costs altogether are considered. Like the more people live in one area, the higher tax rate's going to go for automobiles at least for sure. But anyway, moving on. HJR 205, elimination of non-school property tax for homesteads for persons age 65 or older. So this is obviously just going to be your elderly here, the retired folks here in Florida. According to the Schimberg Center of Housing Studies, about 30% of property owners age 65 or older spend more than 30% of their income on housing costs. HCR 205 would eliminate non school property taxes for Floridians age 65 or older with a homestead exemption. The REC estimates HCR 205 would cost localities, excluding school districts, $6.7 billion annually. And this one has been a hot topic for like a lot of people in like the social media world, especially some people on YouTube, like Sagar from Breaking Points. I don't know if you guys watch him, but he is like freaking out about like how boomers and they all these things. And like, look, man, like if you would just read the bills, right? Like if you would just read, like he's really like big with the public school thing, but like if you just read the bills, my guy, like you would see that it's the public schools are gonna be still getting funded, and I get it. Like he has a lot of things, and a lot of people are like really against the boomer generation, and I feel terrible that like people just they feel some animosity because of their wealth position. Now, I will say, people who are retired, who are like millionaires, they shouldn't be getting Social Security, right? Because they're well established and all that. But like, I really just don't understand the hate on the boomer generation. Like, I'm like, hey, congratulations, good for you. Like, yeah, you were born at the right place at the right time in the right conditions, and unfortunately, we weren't. Gen Y, millennials, Gen Zers, the alphas. We got the short end of the stick. It is what it is, and at the same time though, is that we've had the most amount of like knowledge available to us that I think we've have ignored because we hadn't trusted the internet as much. When it comes to investing, like especially, it's not as taboo now, but I remember in the teens watching YouTube, like listening to YouTube investors was definitely like taboo. Like you shouldn't just trust these people, right? But there was a lot of people out there saying like, invest in real estate, invest in stocks, invest in crypto, invest in these things. So it's not the boomer generation. While they had luck in the timing of all the things, right? Because they had pensions and all this stuff, and we don't have that. We're probably not even going to see Social Security. And this is why like you should get as well educated as you can with finances, and find the proper pathways for you to be prepared for retirement if we get to see retirement. But I'm not planning on retire like me. Like I'm already planning on either working all my life or letting the robots do it. We'll see what happens in the future. But I don't know. I don't understand the hate for the boomers, man. Like it's just like they worked all their life too. They worked hard. Without them, we wouldn't have the technological advances that we have nowadays with how much creativity they had and how much development that they put just out of a garage. So it's like I don't know. I don't get it. I don't understand. But anyway, HJR 213, modification of limitations on property assessment increases. Per the Florida Constitution, the assessed value of homesteads is the value of a home once differentials like Save Our Homes are considered must change annually on January 1st of each year. HJR 213 aims to change the process by requiring assessments to happen once every 3 years instead of annually. The RSC estimates this would cost localities, excluding school districts, $5.3 billion on a recurring basis. And this is a good this is a good reminder of me to like tell you guys right now. If you bought a home in 2025 make sure that you file that homestead tax like at any point of the year, right? File that homestead tax exemption ASAP, because if you are not in that property on by January 1st, you get excluded. And we had that happen to us. We couldn't move in until the 2nd of January. So we had to pay all of 2025's taxes because it was new construction homes. So we had to pay all of 2025 because the land hadn't been assessed for improved property yet, or improved value. So I just want to make you be aware, like as soon as you get moved into your home, if you have some time in between moves, depending on your situation, like the second you sign those documents, fill that form out, put it in the mail, put it in the internet. Like you can go online and do it through the county website, but do that ASAP. It is super important to save as much money as you can, especially with these rising property taxes. So moving on, HJR 207, assess home value, homestead exemption of non-school property tax. So SOH exempts nearly 930 billion of taxable value from property taxes, leading to 15.2 billion in tax savings. The bulk of the states, I really want to know what SOH is. I'm gonna have to look that into. Benefits of single homeowner. Single occupied homeowners. I don't know. Well, anyway, benefits go to long-term homeowners who have accumulated more savings as the market value of their homes outpace the assessed value of their homes, which are capped to the lesser of 3% of the prior year's assessment or inflation. On average, SOH and homestead exemptions offer a combined benefit reduction equal to 50% of market value, i.e., on average, property owners pay taxes on half of what their home is worth. However, new homeowners have not accrued significant SOH benefits do not get the same reduction. Consequently, SGR 207 would create a new homestead exemption for non-school property taxes equal to 25% of the remaining assessed value after subtracting homestead exemptions according to the RAC. This new homestead exemption would cost localities, excluding school districts, $4.6 billion, according to the RAC. This new homestead exemption would cost localities $4.6 billion. Sorry about that. Moving on, HJR 211, accrued Save Our Homes property tax benefit for non-school property tax. Under current law, homeowners can transfer or port their SOH benefits. I really gotta figure that out. Save Our Homes. Yes, of course, Save Our Homes. Their Save Our Homes benefit to a new property if it's made their new homestead within 3 years of abandoning their prior home. For both school and non-school property taxes, their maximum profitable benefit equals $500,000. HJR 211 would make it so property owners could transfer their full benefit. The REC estimates this would cost localities approximately $364 million annually. All right, so current property tax proposals would shift costs and decision making under the guise of savings. And this is, again, an opinion piece. And while the current array of proposals does not contemplate the end of all property taxes, elimination of non-school property taxes for homesteads, a common feature of these joint resolutions, would still cost localities anywhere from $6.7 billion to $18.3 billion annually. Additionally, since the proposals specify that local governments must keep public safety budgets at fiscal year 2025 to 2026 or fiscal year 2026 to 2027 levels, whichever is greater, the passage of any of these resolutions would force local governments to cut other public services or increase taxes or fees to conform to the state's unfunded mandate. In effect, these proposals would preempt local budget decisions to the state, eroding local fiscal autonomy and funding preferences while shifting costs instead of offering real savings. While some Floridians struggle financially would see a reduction in property taxes, the resolution would also benefit wealthy homeowners at the expense of tax fairness. And I do think there should be a cap on this. Again, like if you're a multimillionaire, like, you know, I'm all about property rights and everything, but clearly you've made it, and I feel like there should be a balance, regardless of how I feel about it. So, there should be a balance between, okay, you have this much wealth in your house, you're clearly a millionaire, you're able to afford $1 million home. It wouldn't be a bad idea for you to stay on the plan that you're on, or, they get a little bit of a tax break too. Again, it's not something that I believe in, but I always try to meet in the middle, right? It's all about negotiations, right? We got to negotiate with certain things, just like we do in real estate, as we're doing the buying and selling process, is negotiating to come to a deal. Because if we can't negotiate through things and people just want to be one side on each side of the argument, we're never gonna get anything done. So that's just part of life. So let's see here. So while some Floridians struggling financially would see a reduction in property taxes, the resolutions would also benefit the wealthy homeowners of expense of tax fairness. Several other joint resolutions look to target specific homeowners, for example, those with multi-peril property insurance policies, HCR 209, and homeowners age 65 and up, HCR 205. At the same time, HJRs 213 and 211 would further benefit homeowners who purchased their properties when market values were low in comparison to now. While these resolutions would undoubtedly result in reduced property taxes for some homeowners who are struggling to afford the basics, Floridians with low to moderate income are also the people who would be impacted most by the corresponding cuts to services or increases in other more regressive taxes that localities would be forced to turn to make up for the lost revenue. Furthermore, these resolutions would also benefit wealthy homeowners who already pay the least in state and local taxes as a share of household income. Moreover, due to structural racism and labor market discrimination, Black and Latino households have on average, lower incomes than white households and are more likely to rent rather than own homes, and therefore would be less likely to benefit. Even when looking solely at homeowners, Black households own significantly lower value homes than white households. By providing greater benefits to the wealthiest homeowners at the expense of the 32% of Floridians who rent, sweeping property tax cuts would put the state further from goal of achieving fairness through the tax code. So I have different opinions about that. I actually think there's going to be a certain group of individuals who are going to purchase properties who are renters, and there's a certain group of individuals who are not going to be able to purchase properties. Why? Because they weren't responsible financially and they did not care about their finances, or can't. Unfortunately, everyone has not the same education, the same opportunity to. I mean, everyone has the same opportunity, but not everyone has the same outcome. And education comes in a lot of different ways. There's plenty of people who've made millions of dollars off of education just online. So there is different avenues where you can get educated to, increase your wealth. There's a lot of different ways, and it's just educating yourself on how to get there. There's been a lot of wealth creation as well these past 5 years, 6 years, 10 years. With social media, especially with like Instagram and TikTok Shop and other social medias that provide services for you to show how valuable you are with either selling products or services, just advertisements in general. So while there has been a gap between races and historically and clearly according to this article there still is too. Everyone has some sort of thing special about themselves, I believe, and it's just unlocking that potential within them and finding what they're good at. Even people with diseases, diseases they would call it. They have their own special unique things where they can be very very talented in different areas, and I feel like that this could the amount of education that we have through the internet would definitely help with that. But it unfortunately, again, going back to my point, is that there's going to be people who were renters, who were fiscally responsible, who saved up, who got out of credit card debt, who increased their DTI, or fixed their DTI, fixed their credit scores, and they took initiative to be able to purchase. And there's going to be a set of individuals who couldn't, and they can't. And so it's really going to be, for me, it's like if there is a specific amount of renters entering the market, let's just even say 30% of the people who are renters right now, that's an extra 30% of demand that's going to come. Now, those are going to be first-time home buyers. First-time home buyers, if you've seen my housing market videos as of the beginning, honestly, when I start breaking down those charts and you see how low of entry-level homes are priced, right? Like anything like entry-level would be considered, anywhere from like 180,000 to about 295,000. depending on the type of structure, the type of home. If it's a townhouse, if it's a condo without assessments, that's a newer building. A single family home, typically, in resale or new construction, depending on the area, those are the people who are going to enter that market. And you know what they say, a rising tide floats all the, raises all the ships, right? But it's going to be just for that specific area because as you've been following me, you know that the inventory levels at the median and above or just below are higher than the ones, about 50% of the median price right now. So that's going to bring those property values up because the demand is going to be going up. And what I think is going to happen as sellers see that interest rates are coming down, they want to make a move too. There's going to be more inventory on the market. Sellers themselves can't move because they don't want to drop the price. And the median, as those transactions are closing at the bottom level, because FHA buyers are coming in and the rates are dropping, those closed transactions are going to bring median prices down, especially when the people who have a lot of inventory at the top level of that inventory level, the prices, inventory keeps going up, and the demand keeps coming out of it, and that becomes a buyer's market where the bottom market is a seller's market, but the buyers are there because they can afford it because now the interest rates are lower. They have the FHA assistance if it's going to be the primary residence and they qualify for hometown heroes. If they have grants in the county, things like that is going to help pull them into the market, and that's going to bring the demand there, and prices at the lower level will increase while the ones at the top start decreasing. And if you see in my charts, you'll know that they're very bifurcated after the great migration of the pandemic. And before that, they traveled right along. So at some point, the higher ones are here, the lower ones are down here. At some point, they're going to meet in the middle because that's just what's going to have to happen. There's going to have to be some sort of normalization. It might take 5 years, it might take 10 years for that inventory to finally meet that balance, and then prices will stabilize from there. But it's for me, it's the bottom end is going to definitely determine the market moving into the future. This type of policy right here, if we can get rid of property taxes, like we pay, what we had to pay $6,900 in property taxes in 2025. So if we do the math on that, that's quite a bit of money. So if we can save anywhere from $300 to $500 a month or more on your property taxes, that's just going to give people the more ability to purchase instead, and not just dropping interest rates. It's just going to bring more demand onto the market. So I think that this will drive prices up. How long that will happen until again you're meeting that equilibrium as the demand's going down for the higher price homes and the demand goes on the bottom and meets in the middle. Where that meets, I don't know, but eventually it'll meet and there will be a stable housing market there. And then from there, once they meet, then prices will continue to increase. Obviously, there's things in the economy that can change, right? Um, and then I've said that prices will continue to decrease at the median as rates come down because again, to my point, the lower end buyer has been priced out of the market. They haven't been able to buy. There's a lot of pent up demand there, and that is going to be where the demand goes. Whereas at the top end, yeah, there's quite a bit of demand there, but you don't have as many qualifiers, unfortunately, because those people have earned so much equity in their houses. And, in order for them to find something and actually say, yeah, I'm going to bite the bullet and sell, they're going to have to put a large down payment towards the next one unless they're, moving down and downsizing. And that's another just more demand going towards the bottom end. And so, if an investors, if they're not, if they're coming in and they're adding supply and rehabbing these houses, that'll definitely help with inventory too. So there's just a lot of different, you know, macro, micro, economic things that could happen with this type of policy change in property taxes. But the purpose of this video though is to just break down, what each HGR is, because there's a lot of them. That way you're more educated on, let's just say all of these, what is it, 7 of these are on the ballot. Now you know which one you want to vote for, right? I know which one I'm voting for. because life's expensive, and we need to get this figured out. The schools are going to be funded. I'm more for a consumption tax, as well, so that way it'll actually bring more. Taxes will go up on sales taxes. Consumption could come down if you don't know that we're in a K-shaped economy right now. So the top 10, 20% of the wealthy are the ones transacting more right now, and you probably notice that there's probably a lot of like inventory around in the market. As far as like the retail market, shelves are piling up, or they're decreasing stuff. So prices coming down on that stuff, and that's just deflationary measures to come out into the future, which could lead on to unemployment. Deflation typically leads to unemployment, and with unemployment, there comes foreclosures. Now, what that looks like with AI and AGI coming out, and they announced that pretty much at the Super Bowl, and they have been announcing that for a long time. What that looks like, a lot of people in the market, in the stock markets, the smart money, quote unquote smart money, they've been talking about a double digit unemployment rate. I think starting in 2027, 2020. I think 2027 is too soon, but maybe 2020, 2029. But we'll see. No one really has a crystal ball. You can only really just speculate on what could happen in a different type of environment. And it's definitely AI's definitely helped me a lot, and just different forms of things. It's helped out a lot of realtors, helped save us a lot of time. I'm not one to replace myself with AI when it comes to like videos and stuff, because you can definitely tell it's like super fake. And I don't know. To me, it's like when you're in a position of being genuine, I suppose. I don't feel like it's just like, I'm gonna shoot an AI video of myself, and have this bot speak for me, and it just seems very, I don't know, just seems fake. I don't know. It's not for me. I'd rather shoot genuine content. I think kind of going back to what happened with like music records and stuff like that. Like people prefer, and it'll happen, definitely happen with art, and we saw that with NFTs. It'll happen with art where people are gonna want genuine things again. They're not gonna want this artificial product. It's gonna be, I think, a lot of hype in the beginning, and but towards the end of it, I think people are gonna want to see more genuine things, genuine people, and they're gonna want that. But we'll see what happens. But anyways, I appreciate you guys being here. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you're here with me right now. Leave a comment down below and let me know what you think on this video. I mean, I'm curious to get your opinion on it. Curious to see what you think could happen with this stuff right here. And it's gonna be an interesting. It's gonna be an interesting November 2026. It's gonna be very interesting, and see what happens. So, have a beautiful day, everybody. I hope you are doing well, and have a blessed day.